powers of hell will bend the knee before my great King of glory. All powers of hell will bend the knee before my great King of glory.
Everything will bow before Jesus Christ, and that is a wonderful consolation we have. Regardless of what we face in this life, we can live confidently in the fact that Jesus Christ, He reigns supreme. Take your Bibles and open to Deuteronomy chapter 24. Deuteronomy chapter 24. And in Deuteronomy 24, looking at the ninth commandment, as we're working through the book of Deuteronomy, according to the organization of these commands, as Moses pastorally elaborates on them and gives some more background as to what these commands fully involve. This morning we're looking at a title of the message, How Does Your Garden Grow? And maybe when I say, how does your garden grow, it brings to mind your childhood and a specific nursery rhyme. Mary, Mary, quite contrary, how does your garden grow? With silver bells and cockle shells and pretty maids all in a row. And there's a lot of discussion as to the background behind that nursery rhyme. Often those nursery rhymes were veiled references to present-day circumstances, and the children sang them in the streets, and it really signified a lot of what was going on in that day and age. Some would say that this goes back to Mary Queen of Scots. And Mary Queen of Scots and Elizabeth, they were cousins who vied for the throne of England throughout their whole reign. And eventually came to where Elizabeth won, Mary Queen of Scots lost her head. And so, if I remember that history right. And so, there's a lot of contrariness, and this could be a lot having to do with that history there. There's a second view that says that Mary, Mary, quite contrary, was Bloody Mary, known as Bloody Mary. And Bloody Mary was the Queen of England after Henry VIII. Henry VIII went Protestant, if you remember, based on the Pope not recognizing his second marriage or his next marriage. And so he went Protestant, but Mary kept her Catholic devotion. And so when she became the reigning monarch over England, she persecuted the Protestants. And so it is believed that the nursery rhyme may be a veiled reference to the persecution that Protestants faced at her hand. About 300 are estimated to have died a martyr's death at Mary's hand. Whichever Mary we're going to talk about, both had significant trust issues. When it came to trusting someone close to them, they didn't have a good trust basis. They didn't have a good foundation. Whether it was infidelity within their own homes, whether it was they weren't sure who to trust in the vying of power between different between their relatives that are trying to take the throne. Whatever the case was, there was just all kinds of sordid details in the background of their story. In other words, she might have had a garden that grew in a lot of vice and a lot of distrust, but it wasn't a healthy garden, and it was a garden that she probably had that would be eating you alive, maybe full of Venus flytraps of the human variety. That's the kind of garden that you have when you live in an environment where trust does not exist. We're in such an environment where we're about to be cannibalized by our own system and processes because there is a lack of trust within our society. The days of trust in community are nearly all gone. I didn't grow up in an area where trust was the assumed order of the community. I grew up outside of Washington, D.C. in my later years, and you locked the car everywhere you went. You locked your house door. You made sure everything was locked up. I still remember something got stolen out of one of our cars. I think we had TVs inserted in the headsets of one of our cars. that was new back then. That was like big deal, top of the line, cutting edge kind of stuff. So we were pretty proud of that. But I remember hearing something about it while I was at college, that someone broke into our neighborhood, into our car, and stole those. And I still remember my parents reflecting on just how you feel kind of violated in that moment. How dare you come into something that belongs to me and you take that away? And trust was not something that I grew up with in community. And then I moved here, and I realized there are still pockets in American culture where you don't live like that. So some of you still leave your car unlocked. You might leave your front door unlocked. Maybe not at night, but you still live in relative safety because neighbors look out for one another. And so, my wife picks on me, and some of you pick on me because I'll come to your house, and then you'll hear my car horn beep because I just locked my car. And you'll laugh at me because, silly Pastor Dan, don't you know you're in the country and you don't have to do that? But one day, I won't regret it, and you will, okay? But hopefully that's not because of a lack of trust within our community here as body of believers. But you know what? When you begin to think through it, a lot of times trust can break down within a body of believers as well. I was made aware this past week that there were bags and bags of shredded files from the Stasi. The Stasi were the German secret police, the undercover agents when Berlin was separated by the wall between the east and west of Berlin and all that was going on in the Cold War. The Stasi were investigating those who were disloyal to the communistic religion, which is humanism. And when the wall came down and all that fell apart, this organization shredded all their documents. I mean, they had reams of paper of documents. I think 155,000 trash bags full of documents that are shredded. Well, for some reason, someone decided to keep all these trash bags for all these years. And wouldn't you know that technology is so far advanced these days? I'm not sure exactly the procedure. I would assume taking photo scans of every single shred of paper, computers are able to reassemble all the pieces of shredded documentation and uncover what has gone on or what went on in that past. And all these bags of information are beginning to be put back together, puzzle piece by puzzle piece, and the information is leaking out. I think only 500 bags have been done in recent days because just how much time it takes to do this process. And what is coming into the German culture there is they're finding out that people they thought were their friends weren't their friends. People they thought were faithful family members were not faithful family members. And you can read through some of the revelations that have come through on the news in recent days. But, people are commenting that, wow, that was my neighbor, and they were so friendly, and they were so kind and considerate. And yet, throughout that whole scenario, they were spying on us and reporting to the Stasi or whatever the organization was on our habits and our activities. Family members, church members. Well, when trust begins to break down, it becomes a vicious society. It really does. And one of the things that God wanted to prepare the children of Israel against was that when they went into the promised land, trust ought to be the prevailing atmosphere, environment for the life in the promised land to be successful and blessed. Because as soon as trust is gone, now I'm in a position where I feel I need to protect myself from you because I don't know where you stand. And even if I think I know where you stand, that could change. And then if that changes, then everything I have is lost. And so people get into the scarcity mindset where they hoard all these different things and they hide different things and they clean the shelves of any kind of supply because I will need this instead of recognizing the only way we truly survive is if we trust one another. Hey, you could have all the resources in the world, and you still can't prep enough for what is going to happen by yourself. Do you understand that?
I mean, you can have solar panels on your roof, you can have generators, you can have a pantry of, wise markets would be jealous of in your basement. You could have all kinds of things. You could have root cellars buried in your backyard. You could have propane tanks buried. I mean, you could have every kind of prep out there. But when it comes down to crisis, you will never have enough to survive on your own. When crisis hits, you need that trust within community. I believe that those in Louisiana are going to be learning that in a very vivid way this very morning. Because as they're making preparation for a hurricane that's landing on their shore 16 years from the day of Katrina, they're finding that, boy, we need to be prepped. We need to get things ready. I know how some of that works because of living in Florida. All of a sudden, people band together. You're walking down the neighborhood. You're seeing people are, scurrying around trying to put plywood on their windows, and neighbors just start pitching in, trying to help one another, trying to get it done, trying to protect, trying to do everything they can to help one another. Why? Because now we recognize we have one enemy, and that one enemy puts us in a position where now we are unified to fight that enemy. My friends, this morning we have one enemy today, and it's the roaring lion that walks about seeking whom he may devour. That enemy is not the one sitting next to you or the one that's at your neighbor across the street or even the spouse you share your home with. The enemy is out there, and we must be in solidarity, united to fight that kind of enemy. And so Moses helps them realize this has to happen. And so how does he help the children of Israel understand the necessity of trust in their society? Well, like one or two of the other commandments, there are only a handful of verses that seem to elaborate this command specifically. Let's read through this section, beginning in verse 8 of Deuteronomy 24, down through verse 16. Take heed in the plague of leprosy that thou observe diligently, and do according to all that the priests, the Levites, shall teach you, as I commanded them, so ye shall observe to do. Remember what the Lord thy God did unto Miriam by the way after that ye were come forth out of Egypt. When thou dost lend thy brother anything, thou shalt not go into his house to fetch his pledge. Thou shalt stand abroad, and the man to whom thou dost lend shall bring out the pledge abroad unto thee. And if the man be poor, thou shalt not sleep with his pledge. In any case, thou shalt deliver him the pledge again when the sun goeth down, that he may sleep in his own raiment and bless thee, and it shall be righteousness unto thee before the Lord thy God. Thou shalt not oppress an hired servant that is poor and needy, whether he be of thy brethren or of thy strangers that are in thy land within thy gates. At his day thou shalt give him his hire, neither shall the sun go down upon it, for he is poor, and setteth his heart upon it. Lest he cry against thee unto the Lord, and it be sin unto thee. The fathers shall not be put to death for the children, neither shall the children be put to death for the fathers. Every man shall be put to death for his own sin. All of a sudden you come upon a section of Deuteronomy where it seems like, man, there's quite an assortment of commands that are listed here. What do all these mean? How do all these connect? Well, when you come to verse 8, I believe what we're seeing is that trust begins with honesty. Trust begins with honesty. What do you think would happen in the case of leprosy? Well, when you go back to the Levitical laws and you read through the process that would have to be followed in the case of leprosy, it's pretty well involved. It was quite a process. And ultimately, if you were confirmed in that disease, you lost a lot of your social associations. You were outcast. You were put outside the city. I don't know about you, but I would think that would be a case where you would be reluctant to be honest with those that you share life with in your social community. You would be reluctant to come out and say, I feel like I might have leprosy. You might be reluctant to follow through the procedure. You might be reluctant to go through that process because of what it could mean for you and your family in the end. And Moses presents this as, hey, make sure that you follow the guidelines as presented. Why? Because trust is important in community. Trust is important in community. There have been times where I've been feeling ill in my past, and you're self-conscious about it. Like you're trying to make sure that you keep, your nose is running, your eyes are watering, everything's just, you're coughing and hacking and everything, and all of a sudden you get all self-conscious about, like, I don't want to make anyone else sick. I hope I don't make anyone else sick. And so then you get all worried about it. You know, when COVID was brand new, I don't know about you, allergy season was coming upon us pretty quickly. And every time you coughed in the supermarket, you just knew people were like, COVID, you know, that person's got it. Get them out of the supermarket. You know, whatever the case may be. You know, you have to insist on honesty. But this is a dual reference here because Moses all of a sudden brings in Miriam. Now, think about this in the depths of everything that are going on in Moses' heart. Miriam's died at this point. And you gotta think Miriam held a special place in Moses' life. I mean, that's sister. That's big sister who looked after me when I was just laying there in the ark. I could have been eaten. I could have been killed. I could have been destroyed. And she watched after me. And she was bold enough to walk up to Pharaoh's daughter and say, could I go find you a nursemaid to take care of this little one? Can you imagine that? I mean, the audacity of a little one to walk up to basically the queen, the heir apparent or whatever in the nation of Egypt and say, can I do something for you? To have that kind of just confidence. Wow. You know, as a little girl. And as Miriam ministered with Moses and Aaron, what a wonderful family. But there came a point in Numbers 12 where Miriam misrepresented things. She started to question Moses' credentials to be the leader of the nation of Israel. And we get kind of a window into it in Numbers 12 that they make reference to the woman that Moses married, but really deep down inside the issue was, has God only spoken by Moses? I mean, we're pretty important too. It became a pride issue. And in that case and in that scenario, Miriam, who is only named here, although Aaron was a partner in this crime, begins to break down trust. Now, Miriam so happened to be plagued with leprosy at that moment. Was that simply that God was just punishing her aimlessly and afflicted her with leprosy? Or was God trying to tie this all in, that the lesson in honesty is something that is hinged on this subject of how we deal with something like leprosy? I don't know, but what I do believe that Moses is unpacking for us here is make certain that you preserve the integrity of society by maintaining honesty in everything that you do. If you have a suspicion about someone, that's not the time you mention it, and it's definitely not the people that you ought to mention it in front of. To be honest with someone is to represent them fairly and faithfully, no matter your opinion of them personally. To remain in that position is something that takes a lot of integrity. Miriam failed in that moment. She was plagued with leprosy at that moment that God punished her for this. But it all is hinging on trust begins with honesty. Honesty. You know, if Miriam had been honest, I don't know, I suspect that she might have had a conversation with herself that would have said something along the lines of, you know what? Why am I so jealous over what God is doing through Moses? I should be happy. Moses has brought us out of the land of Egypt. By God's power, Moses has led us out of bondage, and we're on our way to the promised land. If God used Moses or Bubba, I mean, who cares? God is bringing us to a great new conclusion and way of life. Why should I be jealous of this? Praise be to God for what he is doing. You know what? I need to deal with this jealousy in my heart. It's the product or the fruit of pride. I'm growing a garden within my own heart that's going to be cannibalizing my own joy unless I deal with this trust. I don't know what the circumstances might have been. I don't know what conversation she could have had, but that's one possibility. Whatever you're facing in your life, the moment you're about to break down the honesty and integrity that is dependent on you, I guarantee you, you're about ready to grow a garden. And it's a garden that will rob you of your joy. It's a garden that will destroy the joy of your family. Maybe this morning you'd say, well, Pastor, if I'm honest, I tend to kind of let my mouth get away from me.
I might be on the phone with so-and-so, or I might be on a text message, or I might be willing to share something on social media, and all of a sudden my mouth gets ahead of me, and I'm not preserving honesty in our social connections. Let me encourage you that to bear false witness, yes, in a legal and judicial situation, is obviously something that must be upheld. But in a personal society of individuals that were relating with one another, it's something that begins there. It begins there. Will you maintain honesty? As I continue through this section, I come to verse number 10. When thou dost lend thy brother anything, thou shalt not go into his house to fetch his pledge. And Moses goes on to explain the situation. What you have here is there's an honor system. Trust blooms with honor. So honesty is something that happens. Honesty is what I can take care of with me. I need to be honest. Honor is now that if I'm going to be honest and you're going to be honest, we can have a relationship that says, all right, we can treat one another with honor. All of a sudden, trust is starting to bloom with honor. And the situation that's described here in verses 10 through 13 is that someone's been in a need. You have lent money to them to meet their need. And that exchange of meeting a need would often be confirmed with a pledge. Now, the pledge would be a token that would be given to the lender that would say, oh, lender, I will repay you because I want this thing back. And I want this thing back so badly that I'll make certain to pay you as quickly as I possibly could. Well, if that's the arrangement Moses plays out here, then you, O lender, who is graciously helping out someone that's needy, you wait outside of their house until they bring you the pledge that they so deem worthy of this transactional relationship. You see how it could be that you would storm in as the lender looking around saying, well, what am I going to take to make sure that you're going to pay me back? I don't trust your judgment. I'm going to make sure, wait a second here. That means the trust in your society and your community is already broken down. Don't even, Moses is insinuating, lend money to begin with. If you can't have honor in your society, then everything is so broken down, you're going to break all kinds of other commandments before the day is done. And so monitor how you interact with others. Have you ever had something that occurred between you and a friend or family member, and there's been some exchange, maybe finances, maybe money, maybe property, whatever the case may be, and it didn't go according to what you envisioned how it should have gone? I think this would be one of those scenarios where you wait patiently outside. You wait patiently outside, and you make certain that you are not the one that's going to contribute to the breakdown of trust. You might say, well, they're going to take advantage of me. Believe you me, I've talked with people in all kinds of different scenarios, and I can concur that it's most likely they're going to take advantage of you. It's possible, because you're in the situation for that very reason. But what you have to understand is, who is the one who gives revenge? It's always the Lord. And he always keeps better score than you do. And how many times have you defrauded someone else unintentionally? How many times you are likely to expunge those from your own memory? But it comes down to, Lord, you know this is an important matter. I've gone through the right process. I've tried to ask for things. I've tried to petition. I've tried to remind. I've tried to do everything I possibly can. I'm in a position, Lord, where now I need to wait on the outside and wait for them to come forward to make right what needs to be made right. I've done everything I know what to do. Lord, it's all in your control. The moment you barge in and try to take matters into your own powers and try to do things your own way, trust is breaking down faster than you want to admit it or recognize it. You may say again, but Pastor, they're taking advantage. I understand. Maybe a lesson learned that that person will not receive any more assistance from me because they are not trustworthy. Well, but that's hard. I understand. But if the circumstance puts you in a position where trust is about to be torn in fabric, then you need to count the cost and figure out which is more important, maintaining trust or the alternatives. And I would say that the thing that we have to recognize is maintaining trust is most important. When God leads in your life and he says assist and help, then do it with no strings attached. Do it with no strings attached. The more strings you have attached, the more cause for problems you are about to receive in the area of trust. That's what Moses is playing out here. He says, hey, in our society, wait till they deliver the pledge again to you. Trust blooms with honor. But number 3, trust bursts with hope. Trust bursts with hope. Verses 14 and following, he talks about a hired servant who is poor, especially, and needy. He says whether it's a brother or an Israelite or a stranger, in other words, a foreigner that's in your land, when they do work for you, verse 15, don't let the sun go down before you pay them. And so here's the scenario. The scenario is someone is trying their best to do everything they can to meet their needs, to supply their needs for themselves or their family. They're poor and needy. You offer them a job, and they rush in, and they're ready to do the job. And they're seeing this as, my needs are going to be met. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to do the job, but my needs are going to be met. They're going to pay me. I'll be able to go buy dinner for the family, all of that. The scenario is so foreign to us today because the way our economic system runs is you get paid once a week or every other week or maybe once a month. And whatever the scenario is, we just kind of often coast in this confidence that, well, the paycheck's always there. It's always there. But I tell you, when you go to another country, it puts it in a whole different perspective. I still remember flying into Madagascar, Antananarivo, Madagascar, and I got off the airplane, and I know I've traveled internationally. I know you don't do, I don't mess with the nationals that are going to come up to you and want to help you. They seem so helpful. And so many of you that are kind-hearted and merciful, you would be like, oh, they want to help me and all that. No, they just want your money. That's all they really want. And so this pesky guy had been all over me since the moment I came around into the airport. So I'll help you. And so he keeps following me around. I'm like, no, I only have this. I got it. I got 2 hands. I got 2 bags. Don't need your help. I'm good. And usually I'm just fine. Like, I don't have a problem telling him no, buzz off, Like, I'm doing my own thing. I'm okay. And so I just kind of keep walking, but he would not leave me alone. And his persistence paid off. Finally, I was just like, okay, take it. Take it. I don't care. Take the bag. And so we're walking outside, and missionary Dan Brown's out there, and I paid the guy that helped me. And we got in the car, and we were talking about it. And he said, well, how much did you give him? I don't remember how much it was. But he said, you basically gave him a week's wage in 1 drop. He says, they're eating chicken tonight. That's exactly the word he said. They're eating well tonight. You just made their day. I mean, that guy probably closed up shop and went home because, boy, I made great money today doing this. I didn't realize what I had given him and how much it was in value. But that's a situation where someone's poor and needy. He's coming to me. He does a job for me. And let's say, like, I was living in his country, and I said, come back to me tomorrow, and I'll pay you, I don't know, sometime. Well, at that point, this person would have been in a position where I did a job, I'm poor and needy, I'm expecting pay so I can go take care of my family, and now I'm going home without food, without the needs I have met. This is not a good scenario. What will that person most likely do? They're most likely going to pray to God and say, Lord, haven't you seen what I've done? Did you see the work I did? Did you see how that person treated me? They're not paying me and all this. Why? Because we stole their hope. We stole their hope. You and I, we don't realize the impact we have on one another. The way you might interact with someone here, even at church. may be the reason, the root cause that instills hope in their life. You might say, well, Pastor, I'm not hiring day laborers, so this doesn't really apply to me. Maybe you're not hiring day laborers that are expecting a wage to provide food on their table. But could I be so bold as to say there are people that are sitting in this very room that they could use a smile, a word of hope? Can I pray for you? How about we stop right now and pray for that need you just mentioned? Can we take some time to just encourage you and others? Our tendency is to be so self-consumed that, oh, yeah, I'll get to that. I'll be nice, I'll be friendly one day, but right now I've got really important things at hand. I don't have time for the needs of what other people have. I would venture to say that the situation is quite parallel. The thing that someone needs most is hope, and while you're not the source of hope, you're often the conveyor of it, because Jesus Christ is truly the only one that provides hope. And the conveyance of hope by your interaction with someone else makes a tremendous difference, and it builds trust. The moment you stop out of your schedule and you stop and take time to talk with someone and to pray with them and to say, you know what, my life is busy, but your need is very important. Let's talk about you. What have you just done? You've just expressed, I care. I care enough to lay aside everything else in my life for just this moment in time and to look you in the eyes and say, I care. I've taken time to write a note. I care. I've done what is necessary to meet a need. I care. And you might say, well, how does that really build trust? Oh, more than you realize. Because people that live with hope are much more likely to carry on with honesty because they know that they're in a safe place, that these people care. This person cares. And so because they care, I'm going to be more transparent and more willing to be honest. They're more likely to live out and honor their decisions from day to day and to see that bloom. And all of a sudden, you see the cycle just carries on throughout society. You're going to see this is going to be a major issue in Israel in the upcoming chapters. The nation is going to be almost divided on the beginning pages of Judges. One action is misconstrued. There's a lot of background, a lot of baggage underneath, but one action is misconstrued. Boy, they jump on it and they begin to just respond with all the imaginations of how this really appeared to them. And so based on that, they're rushing into war and they're about ready to fight amongst themselves. They've just fought over the promised land and God's given it to them, but they're about ready to fight with one another. And because of that honesty, there's no honor. We don't expect that they're going to be honorable in what they're doing. And because of that, we're about to extinguish hope in the whole land of Israel just because we failed to live out the elaborations on this command. Thou shalt not bear false witness. In our society, the place that needs to have the most solidarity, the most hope, honesty, and honor is within these walls as believers. We ought to be able to live in that kind of scenario. Because when we fail, there's no trust. There's no trust. I don't think that we will get to a point in our own nation, at least in our own church, where we'd have to wonder who's the spy for the Stasi in our country. I don't think that's going to happen here. But what I will tell you is it's not guaranteed. What has to happen is that we treat one another as God tells us we ought to treat one another. The ninth commandment demands that we maintain respect for one another. It aligns with the third commandment, which is thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. which means that we ought to respect the position and name of God. So just as much as you would say it's important to respect the name of God, Moses has put that commandment in parallel with bear false witness. In other words, to show that our respect for one another requires a lot of diligence. It's a simple reminder. It's not too deep to be able to respect. But it just comes down to, are you going to instill hope in the lives of others? Are you going to instill hope? I trust you will. And we can by making sure that we live in honesty, we live with honor, and we live with hope. That's what Moses is instilling in the lives of the children of Israel. I'm finishing a few minutes early because we have many for baptism. And so in a moment, I'm going to pray and ask the Lord to work in our hearts so that we would instill these qualities within our own lives. And maybe at this point, the Lord's tapped on your heart about your mouth getting away from you. Or maybe you've been so busy that you've robbed people of hope they desperately need. They're not poor and needy necessarily financially, but poor and needy emotionally, spiritually. And maybe these are things that you say, boy, if we need trust anywhere, it's got to happen and got to start within our family here at Anthony Baptist Church. Lord, show me what I need to do to be able to maintain trust within this family. Let's have every head bowed, every eye closed. Dear Lord, I pray that you would work in our lives. I pray that you would help us to see exactly how we ought to proceed in our life so that we're able to appreciate the garden, the beautiful garden of trust and what it produces. Lord, that garden of trust produces honesty, it produces honor, it produces hope. And I pray that we would follow through in this simple illustration and application that Moses has provided. I pray that you would help us to guard our mouths, help us to be aware of the needs around us, help us to understand that anything we do is for the benefit of others, and we ought to allow that to stand as it has been given, a gift that you have given to us that we pass along to others to encourage them. Lord, may we be faithful to maintain that very promise in your word. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Would you please stand where you're at? The piano is going to play a song of invitation. And this is your opportunity just to pray quietly and ask the Lord to help you maintain the illustration of trust in your life.